Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am co host Jocelyn Turner. I hope everyone had a fantastic, let me change that, a terrific Tuesday. We are honored tonight to have this most important conversation and a distinguished guest. I call her distinguished, but since we go kind of way back, I can say my friend who's joining us. But before I bring her in, let me, of course, bring in my co-host, Dr. Rogers Kane. Dr. Kane, how are you this evening?
I am doing exceptionally well, considering that I did work today and that I'm a little lax on our show topic, but I'm sure our guest host is going to school me
Enlighten
rather
us.
quickly.
Listen, I tell you what, and one thing, Dr. Kane, you're absolutely right, because as long as I've known our guest, she has been an activist in our community. She's advocated from everything from healthcare to you name it. And a lot of times people become advocates for reasons that personal reasons, and she's publicly shared her own health scare a few years ago. Some people just sit back and just, oh, well, it happened to me. Not this young lady. She said, I'm going to do something. She's fought for it. And so we're really honored to have LaShonda, most notably known as LJ Holloway, who is also a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives Congressional District 4 here in Florida. How are you doing, LJ?
I'm well, thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you and Dr. Kane for having me on Pause for the Truth.
I think you like that, LJ. Pause
I
for
do.
the truth.
Pause for the I don't think we should pause.
Look at it, pause.
I really think we should, I think we should, scream it from the rooftops. But that's just me. They say people who speak the truth have no friends.
Yeah, I don't think I got very many.
Me either. I can
I think we're talking to two of them right now.
We know you have we know you have a busy evening, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And we're talking about a serious topic. We joke around, but we're talking about something very serious, and that's how to stop voter suppression and depression. We always prepare for our show and do our own background, and really it's astonishing to me, LJ, how many articles are out there on this topic. But it also saddens me. Like, why are so many people just so hell bent, if you will, on suppressing votes? Let me read something that I read that Eric Holder did an article on how to beat back the voter suppression backlash. He says that, so Holder suggests place ballot drop-off locations and drive-through polling sites across the country, expand voting hours, open new polling places, send letters to seniors letting them know how to vote by mail, pay election workers $17 an hour. Every American would be automatically, this one is my favorite one of all. Every American would be automatically registered to vote as soon as they turn 18. Everyone gets a voter ID free. It is absurd that we have to register to vote. You know what I mean? It's just absolutely insane that you have to register to vote. I totally agree with that. So LJ, let's just dive into it. Why are people working so diligently to suppress, and I'm going to speak as a Black female, the Black vote?
Well, first and foremost, you ever heard the old adage, it ain't no fun when the rabbit's got the gun?
No, I haven't heard that one.
It's no
It's
fun
been a
when the
long time since I heard that. That's for sure.
well, it's no fun when the rabbit's got the gun. And so the one thing we have in this we have in this country that is really equal, and that is the right to vote. Everyone has one vote. So that is the one place where we are equal. And that's why they fight so hard to suppress the vote. But more importantly, in the city of Jacksonville alone, there are more registered Democrats than there are Republicans in this city. So if you look at the makeup of our legislative body, you wonder, really who's in control. But the reality is the vote is not only suppressed, many of the people in our community in particular still have a slave mentality and they think it doesn't matter. So some of the suppression is within their mind, and a lot of the suppression is happening at the state level and also at the local level. I hate to have to bring up SB 90, but we all know what they did with SB 90. And that really was a bill to suppress our vote. And the sadder part is it happened because our state legislature does have a majority that unfortunately does not want to see people who look like you and me exercise their right to vote. Furthermore, at the federal level, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Section 2 in particular, has not been renewed since 2013. I am running for Congress, and one of the issues on my platform is voting rights, because we must get the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act passed. We have to, not only so that people will be automatically enrolled, but also for those persons who have maybe served time and have not had their rights restored. Look, once you pay a debt to society, it's been paid. So we cannot allow legislatures like in the state of Florida to continue to deny people the right to vote. We still have a clemency board that determines whether or not certain people get their rights reinstated.
Miss Holloway, can you tell people what SB 90 is? You got to remember, our audience like me is not.
Before Dr. Kane, before she does that, let me quote another article that I read on 5 egregious voter suppression laws from 2021. The article starts out by simply saying 2021 was unfortunately a banner year for new barriers to the right to vote. 19 states enacted 34 laws restricting access to voting, far and away the most in any year in at least the past decade. Sadly, Florida was one of the first states that it references, and it is Florida Senate Bill 90, Broad Restrictions on Mail Voting. Take it away, LJ.
So, as I stated, exactly, that's exactly what SB 90 is. It restricts the right to vote by mail, but Florida also enacted in this particular legislature an election protection, which, by the way, uses more than 50 million of your tax dollars to fund. You may have seen recently that 20 convicted felons who had their rights restored were recently arrested. So those are all suppression tactics. Also, when you see people being purged from the voter rolls, that is also a voter suppression tactic. And you're seeing more and more incidences where they are challenging the signature of people. I recently was in an election that had a recount, and many of the ballots were thrown out by the canvassing board for that reason. But to get back to SB 90, SB 90 restricts the vote by mail. In the past, if you were the type of voter who voted by mail, or back when I was in college, when my mother used to send my ballot to me, it was called absentee ballot for your listeners, but it's now called vote by mail. Well, it used to be a time where once you registered to obtain a ballot by mail, every election cycle you would get a vote by mail. Well, now, as a result of the laws that were passed in this last legislative session, what will happen is if you typically requested a vote by mail ballot, You will continue to receive it throughout this 2022 cycle. But after this year, every election thereafter, you will have to request it. So can you imagine your 95-year-old grandmother trying to get a pen? You got to have a pen to even request a vote by mail ballot, and to have to remember to do that every cycle. That is voter suppression.
And you know what else? My mom does the mail-in, and it is so confusing, LJ, that form that you have, and you can only write in a certain color pen, and
you
it's
have to
just
sign it on the
absolutely
back.
ridiculous.
You have to
Yeah,
sign it on the back.
it's just,
yeah.
it's just crazy. And then I was reading the other bill that they talked about was Georgia Senate Bill 202, a ban on food and water, plus subtle attacks on mail voting. And so they know that they have long election lines. I can't bring you a bottle of water while you standing in 100-degree weather. Tell me that that is not inhumane.
Isn't that more than, didn't Florida do something like that as well?
So Florida tried to do it, and that's a part of SB 90 as well. However, what Florida did was they just extended the polling restrictions. And I saw this particular primary season that they got stricter on all kind of rules. It used to be 100 feet from the polling location. Well, now it's 150 feet from the polling location. So if you are at a library, let's just say if you're at the library on Edgewood, well, 150 feet from the polling location is now outside of the parking lot. And because the road leading to the library is so narrow, so that you really cannot, unless you stop people on the street. But those are just suppression tactics. And those suppression tactics are not new. We recall, or we don't recall because we weren't here, but remember during Reconstruction, when men became free and we had the land gentry, and there were more Black men who served in the United States Senate at Reconstruction. That's also when most HBCUs were founded at that time. And as a result of the Black men who were free and who had land and voted, that's why we were able to get so many African-American men into the U.S. Senate. And right now we're hard pressed to keep 2 in the Senate. But notwithstanding any of that, the reality is once we exercise our right to vote, that's when you start seeing these laws to suppress the vote. And of course, that's when they came up with Jim Crow laws. And so I call this Jim Crow 2.0, but maybe it's Jim Crow 3.0 because it's no longer Jim Crow. It's James Crow Esquire, who's his grandson, right? Because we realize that these kind of suppression tactics don't change, they just continue. And because we are a nation of laws, it's so very important that we elect people who not only understand the law, but we ourselves make sure that we exercise not only our right to vote, but exercise the judicial system. I am very thankful that the current administration has appointed more than 43 minority judges to the appellate level, because in many of these states, including Florida, what the governor has done from Rick Scott on to DeSantis, they have stacked the courts with their appointees. And for those persons who can afford to litigate, they oftentimes would not have a remedy but for the appellate level. But so many times when people go to litigate laws that are unjust, they either give up or they're tired and they say, you know what, it's just not worth the money, and they don't pursue it to the appellate level. But we understand that not only are they suppressing the vote, but they're also stacking the courts. We saw that happen right now in Congressional District 5, which is now Congressional District 4. More than 1.5 million minorities have been disenfranchised as a result. Of course, I went to Tallahassee and spoke on the record and took a number of people with me, and they did the same. But the reality is, if you don't have a majority in the state legislature, there's really not much you can do but for appealing, of course, at the judicial level. But the reality is our Supreme Court declined to hear the case.
Wow, we have a question. Wait a minute, Dr. King, we have a question. Is voting supposed to be easy? is it not a requirement that you be an active participant in society to vote? If so, then what's wrong with requiring yearly requests for mail-in ballots?
Well, the problem with if we live in a country that is based on a democracy, and a democracy is for the people and of the people, all people should be able to participate in the process, right? And the law also states that it should not be burdensome to vote. We should have fair and free elections. It should not be cumbersome.
That's what the law says. You know, one of the things that, as you were speaking, and I guess maybe a reflection of my age, I thought about what our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents, those same guys that you mentioned back in the Reconstruction era, the things that they had to do just to vote. You know, walk 10 miles, you know, ride a horse for 10 miles. These people don't have to get in a car and ride it 2 miles, you know, but you know what they have to. This is just my personal belief and personal concerns. Is that if you don't vote, you will feel the consequences down the road, especially in today's society. There was a long period in our generation. I'm gonna say our generation. I know you guys are younger than me, but there was a long period in our generation where it looked like, to some people, particularly younger folks, there was parity in terms of society. I think Donald Trump and his people have very vividly dispelled that for those that are, as they say, that are woke.
Yeah, go ahead, LJ. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Yeah, and I'm just going to quote another disgusting bill. This one is in Iowa, criminalizing election officials. I remember a few months ago when the mother-daughter were at the Senate hearing about being threatened. They are just workers, just trying to do their civic duty, make a living for themselves, and to be threatened for allegedly stealing or doing something, throwing ballots out. It's just so ridiculous. But let me just tell you, let me announce something that I'm doing this weekend. So the National Urban League has launched Reclaim Your Vote. It is an opportunity for people to do just that, reclaim your vote. The first thing we need to do is register to vote. I always urge people, don't take it for granted that all your friends and family are registered voters. Make sure that you ask your friends and family to register to vote. Well, guess what? They may not know how to do that. So take them to the supervisory election office. We have listeners who may not live in Jacksonville or in Florida even. Check who the supervisory election or where the supervisory election offices are in your city. And then, of course, the next step is to learn who your candidates are. Appreciate folks like LJ who've made it just, I think it's awesome when people run for elected positions, especially when they are qualified to run. Now, some people will wake up and say, I'm running for office and have absolutely no expertise or knowledge about what's going on, and they're just mad with what's happening in their neighborhood. And I don't blame them, because when you get fed up with how things are happening in your neighborhood, you want to be proactive and doing something about it. However, for those persons who want to vote, learn who your elected officials are and what they stand for. And it doesn't align with your beliefs. I don't know if I'm freezing or if it's my internet that's unstable, but
No,
hopefully if it is, I'm gonna.
We hear you fine.
Am I going in and out?
We hear you fine. And one thing I would add to that is, and this is no slight on anybody, but the one thing I will say is, make sure you ask the question, particularly for those who have been in office already. You ask the Janet Jackson question. What have you done for me lately? What have you done since you've been in office? You know, ask them What
Yeah.
what have they proposed? What have they put forth, whether they're in Congress, whether they're in the state Senate, whatever it may be? And if they, this is just my belief, if they can't give you an adequate answer, which most of the time you already know anyway, they can't give you an adequate answer, then I already know what you promised before. I know what you didn't deliver. I guess I'll try the new guy and see if they hold their promise in terms of deliverance. Because if you've done nothing for me already, that means you can continue to do nothing for me. And so let me at least try some a breath of fresh air that I will rely on doing the right thing. Sometimes I'm not in agreement to what they may see to be the right thing, but they did something. They did attempt to do the right thing in their mind. At least if a person can tell me that, they got my vote. So I am very happy to see fresh faces.
Well, let me say also, I'd like to interject. Of course, I concur with your sentiments, Dr. Kane, but let me also say that we need to also make sure that we understand the role that we are researching, because too many times people are voting and they vote based on like or looks. I remember I served as a Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Fellow when I graduated from law school. And I had to do a white paper with Maya Rocky Moore Cummings, Dr. Maya Rocky Moore Cummings, who is the widow of Elijah Cummings. And she and I were very young in our career at the time. And Bill Clinton was the president. And what we found in our research is that Black people vote on likes and white people vote on looks. And to prove that point, Arkansas at the time was one of the poorest states in the nation. Remember, Arkansas and Mississippi, we always volley between 49 and 50 as being the two poorest states in the nation. Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, and he had the Jennifer Flowers scandal. Guess what? He was elected president because white women thought that he was good looking, and Black people liked him because he played the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. And he became the president of the United States. Now, no one can deny the fact that he was a Rhodes Scholar and that he's very smart. And he is that, and charismatic. But it proved our point. And typically in the Black community, once you're elected, you are in, because if they like you, you keep a job. Case in point, I have run for Congress more than once. And the first time I ran, it was, of course, it's a calling on my life. That's number one. I'm not that crazy to run against a 24-year incumbent, but I fear God. But notwithstanding any of that, that particular person had only passed one bill, right? But they had a slogan, and they had some tactics, and it worked, and people look for them to this day. The second time I ran against someone, and no slight on pharmacists, Dr. Kane, because I know you were a pharmacist, but the reality is Congress writes laws. They don't count pills, right? So the average person doesn't even understand the role of an office. So I would encourage your listeners to at least understand the role. So many times I'll have people when I'm out on the campaign trail, and they'll say, yeah, what you gonna do about, what you gonna do about this so-and-so and so? And I'll say, well, unfortunately, education is a state function, and we do have a school board. And so people don't even really understand the function of many of the offices that they are voting for. In the past, I have held seminars or town halls, if you will, to help people understand the amendments, because the amendments are written vague for a reason. They have short titles, and the titles are vague. So oftentimes people will read the short title and assume that the amendment they're voting for is one thing, when in fact it's a red herring to do something totally different. And on this particular ballot that is fast approaching on November 8th, there will also be questions asking whether or not you will retain judges. How many people do you think actually research what judges to retain and what judges you should let go? Well, guess what? Tonight, I'm going to give you a freebie. I'm going to suggest that you vote no on all of them except for Jose Labredo. Most of them were appointed by Rick Scott or DeSantis. And if you look at their record, you will find that many of the decisions were not favorable. But I would
Is
hope
this the
to be your
Supreme
own
Court? Supreme Court judge?
for the state, yes, for the
Yeah,
state
I just
Supreme
want to
Court.
make sure. Yeah, okay.
Yes, for the state Supreme Court. Of course, we don't elect to retain our judges on the United States Supreme Court. They have a lifetime appointment.
No,
Unfortunately.
I was thinking about the local judges, making sure people understood that we were not referring to, like one of my favorite judges, Rhonda Peoples Waters, that we were not talking about those judges locally. So, and several of them that I quite.
Yeah, Rhonda and I went to law school together, and that's why it's so important about who you elect, because Rhonda, as you know, her story, she applied more than 13 times to be appointed, and she made it, a number of times to the final round, but was never appointed. So who you elect is very important in understanding why you elect them, and the roles and the power in each seat is very important. I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
And also, and to further reiterate my point, of course, I run for Congress because I have federal experience. People always say, well, why don't you run for city council? And I'm like, well, to be quite honest with you, I don't have any local experience. I started my career in federal. I have more than 23 years of federal experience. I worked for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I negotiated the largest deal in history at U.S. Customs, which people said could not be done. And this little colored girl from Jacksonville, Florida, had then General Colin Powell to say, thanks to LexisNexis, we were able to track down Al Qaeda. And I lost many special agents in charge in the Twin Towers because I spent a lot of time with special agents in charge trying to negotiate that deal. So this is a very special week for me of remembrance because I lost many friends in the Twin Towers, but notwithstanding any of that, the reality is to make sure that we have people who are qualified because we have too much at stake to just vote on likes or looks. Our country is in crisis. And you know that when America gets a cold, our community typically gets the pneumonia, and we have to start taking our voting more seriously. And to that end, I'd also like to share that Friday is Black Voter Registration Day. And as Jocelyn intimated with Jacksonville Urban League, we also know that NAACP and many of the Divine Nine and many other organizations will be registering voters. And the last day to register to vote in the general election on November 8th is actually October 11th. So for those who are listening who may not be registered, or for those who are listening who knows that there is someone in your family who is not registered, please, ma'am, please, sir, look at the man or woman in the mirror and make sure you get your loved ones registered. But do more than make sure they're registered. Make sure they go to the polls. Take them, make it a family outing, invite them to lunch, give them some incentive to vote. Do what you have to do because, in the words of Malcolm X, it's either the ballot or the bullet.
Well, I want to let me say this real quick, Ms. Turner. Ms. Holloway, what I just like to piggyback on with all of you, what you said is also educate that person, your family member, your friends, whomever. Educate them on the candidates. Okay, I won't tell a person who to vote for necessarily. Most of the time,
you can.
Yeah, most of the time, well, anyway, the bottom line is we need to help educate our people as to who it is that you're voting for and why. What's the cause? Listening to you this evening. I think an individual, anybody listening, can see that you are educated, well educated on the topics that are very important, especially as it relates to African Americans. So,
well, not just African Americans,
only African Americans. Don't think to
our
Constitution, all people.
Well, on our Constitution, as I stated, we are a nation of laws. And of course, laws, of course, that were written can be amended. And so we need people, one, who will make sure that those laws that are unjust and that do not pass constitutional muster we have to make sure that we have people at the table to make sure those unjust laws don't make it past committee. So oftentimes we will elect people who everybody thinks that they could just read a statute, but unfortunately with the law, it's the exceptions and not just reading a statute. I won't let people bastardize my law degree. I had a hard time at University of Florida earning that law degree. And the reality is you are tested. I mean, not tested. The reality is it's important to know the exceptions. So if you're just reading a statute and you don't know what you don't know, then of course you don't know when to object or when language does not pass constitutional muster.
It is more about, it's not just about popularity, as you said, with the pharmacists. Yeah, I'm a pharmacist, but I am not a pharmacist that can appreciate the legal maneuvering that you do. So, I know my lane, I stay in it.
Exactly,
so
as we all should.
My lane.
Right. You don't go to
a plumber. Had a question.
You don't call a plumber when you need your car repaired.
No, I sure don't. Exactly. Unless it's a water hose.
So we had a question, LJ. How do you get people excited, or how do we re-engage people and really get them interested in voting again? Because people feel so disenchanted.
So we have to, I'm glad you said that, because there is some voter depression. And so you have to engage people and meet them where they are and talk about issues that are important to them. Is Social Security important to most Americans, considering most Americans at some point want to retire? I would bet that it is. Well, I will tell you that Social Security is on the table to be chopped. My opponent and Rick Scott want to eliminate Social Security. My opponent is also in the Senate, in the state Senate right now, but we know that the current governor drew this particular seat. He drew this particular map and this seat for him in particular. And that's because they have a plan. And so we cannot allow that plan to take place, because we know that too many Americans rely on Social Security to retire. More importantly, you have to, it's a young person. Most young people are disengaged or have voter depression. And I'm starting to encounter older people who have voter depression, right? So for an older person, you talk about Social Security. For a younger person, you'd say the minimum wage has not been increased. The federal minimum wage has not been increased in more than 12 years. That's important to a young person. Do you want a fair living wage? Or do you want tips that are on parity with the pricing index? Absolutely. So you have to meet people where they are and talk about issues that are important to people. If someone is disabled, you'll talk about the fact that Florida is one of 6 states that did not expand Medicare. That is important to voters. If the person is a veteran, you will talk about the backlog in veteran services. So I think it's important to talk about issues that are important to individuals, as opposed to saying people died for the right. Because while I can appreciate people dying for my right to be free, I don't take that lightly. Everybody cannot appreciate that fact. So we have to meet people where they are and make sure that we are talking about issues that are important to that individual voter to encourage them to vote. Because, quite frankly, when I worked on Capitol Hill, I worked on Capitol Hill for Congresswoman Carrie Meek. And I will tell you that I left the Hill because I too became disenfranchised with the system. You have too many lobbyists engaged in our country. I believe in campaign finance reform. I don't believe that special interests should be able to influence our country, but in fact it does. You'll see my opponent has $1.5 million, and you will see that I'm having a hard time getting $5. And I always tell people, what's important to you? They'll invest $500 for a purse, but won't invest $5 for their freedom or for social justice, right? But yet you want to wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. But notwithstanding any of that, I refuse to take money from special interests, because I understand that if I take money from special interests, then I won't be beholden to the people. I'll be beholden to the interests for whom I have accepted the dollars. And so everyone is not as principled as I am, and I understand that. And some people will say that it's naive or it's ignorant on my part. But I always say that money don't vote, people vote. And we're doing it for the hard way. But this way, we know that, when the people elect me, they'll have someone who genuinely loves the people and who wants to serve the people.
let me pick it back. One other thing on that real quick, Ms. Turner, and that is not only is your Social Security being threatened, so is your Medicare.
Yes.
And for those younger folks who think, well, that's my dad or my grandmother, don't think that you may not be taking care of your dad or your grandmother one day and wish you had that Medicare and that Social Security check to help take care of them. Because if you think your salary won't get you won't get you very far right now, add on another person of age and the illnesses that they may have, and your needs will just skyrocket in terms of the amount of monies and help that you need. And if they take Medicare off the table, your parents, your grandparents may be done for.
And more importantly, people paid into Social Security. So it's not like it's an entitlement program. People actually pay into Social Security.
Exactly.
So they paid for those protections. So because they paid for those protections, we need to ensure that they have those protections. And you'll hear arguments that say, "Oh, but understand that the United States has enough money to pay for Social Security for the next 34 years." So understand that America is not on the verge of bankruptcy. They can afford to pay for Social Security over the next 34 years, but it does need to be expanded so that the next generation will have those protections. The other thing is, in our country and in life, you want to move forward and not back. We hear people talk about affordable housing and the affordable housing crisis. Dr. Kane, you may remember when there were sometimes 1, 2, and maybe 3 generations living under one roof, and you're going to start to
still that. That is still that. That was part of the COVID problem we had.
You're going to see it even more because you'll find that children who are graduating from college now cannot afford to buy a $300,000 home, right? So what are they going to do when they graduate other than move back home, right? And heaven forbid they start a family, so you'll have 3 generations under a roof. So instead of moving forward, we're moving backwards. And so we need to make sure that we are moving forward and not backwards. So for all
one last thing, Ms. Colonel, I do want to let Ms. Holloway know a lot of what you just said has been on our previous program. So you can, when you got time to go back and take a look,
I don't have
some of that up front.
I don't have that time. I'm a guest on your show right now, and I put somebody else on hold. I am running a campaign, and I am running hard.
I understand. I'm just saying, when you got time.
Never. I'm at somebody else's house.
After you win the election.
Then I'm going to be trying to save the people and right some of the wrongs that are currently in place. We need to overturn a lot of these bad laws.
I agree with you. So I mean, I can't say anything better.
So tonight we're talking about how to stop voter suppression and depression. If you have any questions, if you just tuned in, call in now, 1-888-669-1280. Again, 888-669-1280. You've heard a lot from LJ tonight. She said some good stuff. I was having some technical issues, so let me do my infomercial real quick and give her a breather to take a breath. But this weekend, it is, as LJ mentioned, is National Black Voter Registration Day. And I am volunteering with the Jacksonville Urban League on some activities this weekend at Edward Waters University on Friday and FSCJ downtown campus on Saturday. And we're going to do some churches on Sunday. If you are not a registered voter, please, please, please don't wait till someone come to you. Make the step, take the step. If you don't know where to go, we're so accustomed to Googling things. Google wherever you are, how do I register to vote? It's just that simple. Get registered to vote is simple questions that are asked of you. Now, if you know you have gone to jail and your rights have not been restored, then unfortunately you're gonna have to wait the next round. Keep your life in order. And I don't have my notes with me, but the bottom line is check to see if your rights are still available for you to vote. I've talked to some people who unfortunately were on the other side of the law, and they went to jail, and they've been told by people who don't mean them any good that you can't vote. You'll never be able to vote. Don't believe that. There are organizations that will work with you to help you make sure that your rights are restored if you think they're not. Check. As a matter of fact, where are my notes? There's a place where you can write or go online to see.
It's frrc.org. You could go to frrc.org. They also have funds for those people who may have fines. More importantly, Jocelyn, not to contradict you, but for those persons,
oh, no, please correct me.
so for those persons who may have a felony or who are not sure whether or not their rights have been restored, what we are encouraging people to do is make sure they fill out a paper application. They can either go to Monroe Street to the Supervisor of Elections office. It's 105 East Monroe. They can go to the Supervisor of Elections office, or they can fill out that paper form, but make sure that they tell the truth on the form. Don't lie on the form, tell the truth on the form. And then the onus is on that particular issuing body, which in most counties is the Supervisor of Elections office. The onus is on them to issue the card. If they issue the card, then that person can vote. If they don't issue the card, they should give them an explanation as to why their particular application was denied.
Now, that brings to mind those 20 voters that were set up, is what I call it. Brings to mind those 20 voters that were set up by our current governor administration. Can you get into that a little bit in terms of how to avoid that?
Absolutely. Of course, those cases are being challenged, and we do believe that those litigants will prevail because they didn't issue the cards to themselves. The Supervisor of Elections office issued those cards to those voters. And so we know that, this election protection office, they have to justify that $50 million that they just took from the taxpayers, right? And we also know that Broward County is very blue, which is probably why they were targeted in Broward County. But notwithstanding any of that, that's what they want to do. That's a part of voter suppression. They want to intimidate people into not registering or being afraid to vote. And so we cannot succumb to the intimidation. We have to continue to register people and not let people be afraid to register to vote. And that's what they want to do, is have people afraid to register to vote. By all means, yes, register to vote. Let them tell you no, because if they issue you a card, look, you have the right. You're not doing anything illegal if your card is issued. And if you have a fine, then they will also, if they deny you the right to vote, then they should also give you the explanation and the reason why you were denied. And then you'll know, okay, well, it's because I have a fine of this amount. And then you can go to frrc.org for them to restore your rights. And they often have grants to help people pay any fines that they may have outstanding.
No one should be fearful of voting when they do it the right way. No one.
Right. That's why I say make sure they tell the truth on the application.
Right.
Yeah, don't lie on the application. Tell the truth on the application. Do not lie on the application, but by all means, apply, register. The other thing I want to discuss, which I think oftentimes we overlook, often because most of us are middle class, and Dr. Kane, nobody's in your class. But the reality,
right. I'm too old. I'm too old.
I meant financially, but the reality is we oftentimes take for granted that people know how to vote. Of course, I have been going to vote with my mother since I was a child, when they had the little curtain and you punched a little hole, right? But the reality is there are a lot of people, in particular Gen Z, who never went to vote with their parents, and they're intimidated by the process. Now, they may not admit that they're intimidated by the process, but I had a young man who said, Miss LJ, I ain't never voted before. And he's 25. He said, I ain't never voted before. I don't know what to do. And I said, well, listen, let me tell you, what they're going to do is when you walk in the door, they're going to ask you for your ID, hand them your ID, and then she's going to ask you to sign. Make sure you sign it the way it appears on your ID, and then she's going to give you a piece of paper and tell you to go to another table. They will give you a ballot, and they will also give you a cover sheet, and then you're going to look for an empty space where you can either go sit down or stand up and bubble in the names that are next to the persons who you want to cast a ballot for. And then when you get up, you'll see a lady over at a machine, and she'll summon you over to her, and you'll insert your ballot into the machine and make sure you see the number on the machine advance to ensure that your vote was counted. And it's just that simple. But if no one ever tells you, or you don't know, sometimes, I have no shame, and, I'm shameless. So, of course, I ask questions, but there are a lot of people who are not as bold as I am who will not ask questions. And so rather than be embarrassed, they just won't go and vote. So we have to make sure that, one, we share sample ballots with people, and make sure we tell people how to vote, because we just say go vote. We don't ask if a person knows how to vote or if they've ever voted before. So we have to educate people on how to vote. And they say, keep it simple, stupid, talk. And sometimes people are offended when you talk to them, at an elementary level. But if you tell it to a person in an elementary level where everybody understands, then of course we won't have the problems that we have, like I experienced with undervotes, because and you can tell what area people are from based upon the ballots that were rejected. And oftentimes it's in 7, 8, 9, and 10 where you see undervotes where people will check or make an X as opposed to bubbling the oval that's next to the name that they want to vote for. Or people don't vote down ballot, which means to vote for every election down the ballot. Sometimes people just go in and vote for one thing and then leave. So for all those reasons, we have to make sure that we not only register our voters, but also educate our voters.
I've gotten
And
in
I'm
the
glad
habit
you said that,
of
because a lot of, or I wish a lot more. I have to say this, Dr. Kane. I wish a lot more organizations will do it in a step-by-step way. First, encourage people to register to vote, and then before the actual election happens, educate them just as you did. You walk through simple how to what you're gonna experience when you walk in. But the thing is, though, when you talked about the signature, I was reminded of when I went through a training recently, and it reminded folks to, if your signature may have changed. My signature was crazy when I was younger, at 18 years old, of how I used to write a J in my name, some funky way, right?
Because you
So
were
if
going to
you
be
don't
famous. We knew that.
Exactly. So when your signature, if you think your signature has changed over the years, I didn't even realize you can put in a request to change your signature so that when you go to vote, that will not happen where it says, well, this is not you, your signature is different. And I just didn't know that. So I wish that any people who are leaders of organizations, you mentioned the Divine Nine, and if you don't know who that is, those are members of fraternities and sororities, Black fraternities and sororities. So, please host these community events around town to educate people. Once you're registered to vote, here's how to participate in the voting process. Here's what, and I'm not sure if they're going to be sending out the sample ballots anymore, because again, suppression is happening. But show people what a ballot looks like. We cannot make the assumption. It's too very important. One key thing that I wanted to say to you, LJ, that a person said, and I'm not going to identify them. I'm glad I don't remember their name. I attended the inaugural civil rights conference here in Jacksonville. And one young person said, I don't like voting because I'm not satisfied with the candidates. They're either bad or badder. But I vote because I know it's important. So I choose the best of the worst. So I am happy that that you are a candidate who shared your professional background, which you are educating folks, letting them know why you are qualified to run for candidacy. And I just have to say it out there to people. If you want to be an elected official someday in the future, start educating yourself. Educate yourself on the issues in our community and viable ways to solve those issues. Talk to folks who, when I worked for the health department, people used to come and meet with us because they wanted to learn more about health issues that were relevant in the community. Talk to people from various environmental agencies, Medicare agencies, whatever issues that you know affect the community that you're about to serve, and make yourself more qualified to be a candidate for office. That's my rant, Dr. Kane. You're about to ask a question.
No, I was just going to make a statement as well, and that is that with the last voting cycle, I got my sample ballot and I marked it up and I stuck it on my wall in my office. But, you know, if a patient walked past and looked at it, they may ask me why, and I can explain to them why I'm voting the way I vote. But, you know, if they didn't ask the question, I didn't tell them to go look at it. But a lot of them were interested in, why are you voting this way or why are you voting that way? And I was just trying to encourage people that, given their situations, I'm not asking anybody to risk their livelihood or anything, but given their situation, sometimes it may be that grandma is in the house and she just want to hang up her sample ballot so that the grandkids can come in and go, Grandma, why are you voting for Miss Holloway? And then grandma can tell them. And the other benefit to that is grandma had to look and investigate Miss Holloway to give her the credentials and the credibility that justify getting grandma's vote.
Exactly. And there's no law against exercising your influence if you are not, if of course it's not in a place where you have a fiduciary over someone, but as a father, a mother, a grandmother, or a community stakeholder, there's no law that says you cannot tell people, look, why you are voting a certain way. We have freedom of speech in this country, so you can exercise your freedom of speech and tell people if you so choose. Now, I typically tell people that I vote my conscience, and I do vote my conscience, but I will tell you that I have probably about 3,000 people in total, just through various organizations, who call and say, Holloway, what we doing, or how are we doing it, or who will say, are you coming to our barbershop this week and tell us what we got to do? And then they'll post it in their barbershop. And so the reality is, we have to do that because everybody does not have the time to do the research. And most people, for me, I just stay abreast of what's going on in any community where I pay taxes. So, I do the research all the time. I will never forget that there was a judge in Jacksonville who said that all ends should go back to Africa. And they have what's called a quick pick. And that person paid a certain person to be on a quick pick, and he was reelected because people did not do their research. All they did was went by this person's quick picks.
Yep. No, and I let them answer. I let them ask me. So I figured that I'm not exercising any undue influence because all I did was put it up there. If they came back and they asked me, then I will give, they asked me the question. I didn't give them an answer before they asked the question.
I agree, but I think it's the responsible thing to do as a parent, a stakeholder. A loved one. I think the onus is on each of us to take care of the people that we love. And so if there's someone in my family who makes a peach cobbler like someone's making right now, since I couldn't go to Michelle Martin, they make better peach cobbler than me. So guess what? I let them make the peach cobbler. I am the person who does the legal research in my family, so I do the legal research. So we all have gifts, and we have to share our gifts. Sharing is caring.
There's a question right now. Jocelyn, you going to read that question? I can't hear you.
That's because I was muted. That's the one time, Dr. K, you probably was happy not to hear me, right? But the question is, Should people be concerned about physical intimidation while waiting in line to vote? If so, what do they do? We live in different times now.
Well, number one, well, I shouldn't say every precinct, but most precincts have what is called a poll watcher to protect voters from intimidation. But we do know that there is now an election protection team out there, and they may do that. So I would encourage people to call 1-866-OUR-VOTE, and that is manned by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and it's 1-866-OUR-VOTE. So if you experience intimidation, by all means call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. But depending upon your party, each party typically has a legal protection team. I know that both parties in Duval County does. However, I am running to represent people in both in 3 counties, which is Nassau, Clay, and Duval. And so each of those counties have election protection teams. But in particular, if you experience it, I typically tell people call 866-OUR-VOTE, because I know the people who are a part of the Legal Defense Fund for the NAACP who actually manage that program, and they've been doing it for years. You should be able to vote freely, free from intimidation, and without undue influence.
Let me just say this,
Well,
Ms. Turner.
LJ, guess what? We've reached the hour.
Is not new. Think
Right.
about what your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, the intimidation that we're talking real intimidation. People out there with guns and threats and, whatever it might have been before you got to the poll and once you got to the poll. So,
Right.
I'm not minimizing the level of intimidation that we have today.
And we shouldn't have, and when legally, we shouldn't have to experience it. We shouldn't have to go back to those times, and we should not experience it at all. So if you experience it, make sure you ask the person their name, ask them their capacity. You have a cell phone, take a picture of them, write it down, so that once you get in a safe place, you can make a phone call and report that incident. So 1, no one else experiences it. And 2, we can make sure that we investigate and, bring proper charges if necessary against anyone who intimidates a voter.
Yeah, tell on them.
Well, LJ, guess what? We've reached the hour.
Well, I must say,
it's been a very, very interesting conversation, and we're just so proud of you and all that you're doing. But as we end every show, we like to invite our guests to share their final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion, which is how to stop voter suppression and depression. So take it away, LJ.
Well, one way that you can stop voter suppression and depression is doing your independent research and making sure that you exercise your right to vote. No one can take away from you what you are actively engaged in and understand. We know that in this country in particular, that look, you have rights, and that's one of the beautiful things about our democracy. And in this country, you do have the right to vote, and you must exercise your right so that you will not continue to have voter depression, because a government is only as strong as the people it elects. So you have the power to elect the person of your choosing to represent you. And I would hope that the people who are on this call will vote LJ Holloway for a better day, and find me at ljhollowayforcongress.com or on all social media platforms.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great advice. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts on tonight's topic?
Well, I will find LJ Holloway. I will find it and try to help reward her on what she's trying to do, and work with her, because I am a believer. She has gotten my vote because she is speaking. She's speaking straight to the point. She's not being politically correct. Even though I can deal with people being politically correct at times. There are other times when you need to be frank and to the point. So I concur with her. I am very happy that she continues to fight the fight that many of us continue to fight. And then some of them not us, but some people have given up. And so hopefully, with what you said this evening, we can reignite that flame in people to get back and think about their families. Because even if it doesn't affect you personally, which it does, but even if you feel it does not affect you personally, does it affect your mama, your sister, your brother, your niece, your nephew? I mean, when you suppress the vote, that means the will of the people is being suppressed. Whether it's suppressed, depressed, or oppressed, all of the pressures need to go away. Okay. And I think we have to work hard at it and work together, regardless of any friendship or lack thereof. It's about doing the right thing for yourself, your family, and your community.
And for those who are yet unborn, because people who are born in poverty have a hard time getting out of poverty. So we have to vote even for those who are yet unborn.
Oh, I mean, you said something real quick. I got to just throw this out. I saw where Lindsey Graham today proposed a national abortion law. Really? That was the premise behind the Supreme Court's ruling, right? That the state should have it. So how would the Supreme Court feel about, a national? It's crazy, but
because they realize what happened in Kansas and what's happening in these states are people are not going back. So the Republican Party is losing their majority. So the only way they can save it now is to try and introduce a national ban on abortion. And that's what I tell people, even with my anti-choice opponent. I may not have money, but I do believe that there's going to be a lot of people who will cast their vote for me because I am pro-choice, and they are not going to cast their vote for an anti-choice candidate.
Make sure you give the information to our behind the scene guru, which Jocelyn will mention later. But give it to our behind the scene guru, so people who want to join in on your campaign, even though we know that this was not because of a campaign motive. I don't want anybody to say, "Oh, he had her on that campaign." No, we asked you for your opinion. You gave it, and I think you gave it very fluently, and I think people really can understand and appreciate where you're coming from. But make sure you leave your information so that our audience can get with you as well as myself.
Yes, you can reach me at ljhollowayforcongress.com, and you can reach me by the old-fashioned phone. We have people who answer our phone, and it's area code 904-300-5677. Again, that number is 904-300-5677, or you can reach me at ljhollowayforcongress.com, or again, as I stated, on all social media platforms. I thank you all for the invitation. And Dr. Kane, I know where your office is. I'm going to bring an envelope and visit you.
Bring it back.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Ms. Turner?
Well, I think my internet might be a little unstable, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a go. As you can tell, tonight's topic on how to stop voter suppression and depression, very important. Again, talk to your friends and family. Make sure that they are registered to vote. Write down those issues that are important to you, that are affecting you and your family. As LJ say, not only your family today, but your future children and grandchildren. Think about those things that are important. Write them down as you're having conversations with candidates who are going to be coming vying for your votes. Make sure you ask them those questions about issues that are of importance to you. We've seen what happened with the right to choice, those persons who are pro-choice, or a right for a woman to do what she wants to with her body. We've seen other things change. You may not like it. Don't just sit back and complain and text your friends and say, "Oh, that's horrible what they're doing." Get out, talk to people, get in your current elected officials' faces and demand change for your community if you're not satisfied with issues that are happening to you and to you as well as your community. Don't look at other parts of town where you live and say, it's a shame they don't care about our community as they care about other communities. Then you need to call, go to their office, ring their phone constantly, go to your city council meetings, go to Tallahassee if you can, talk to those national elected officials. There are ways to get in touch with them. Again, do your homework. We Google what restaurant to go to. We Google what outfit to buy. Google those things that matter to you. As always, thank you for tuning in to pauseforthetruth.com. We always like to give a shout out to our behind the scenes technology expert, and that is calltyrone.net. Thank you. Please share your ideas of future topics that we can talk about on Pause for the Truth. And we hope to see you next Tuesday. If you have not gotten your COVID vaccine or booster, make sure you do so, because right now we're dealing with access for getting those. They're not as readily available at community locations. You're going to have to go to the doctor, to retail pharmacies. Do take advantage of those few community vaccine events that are made available to you. Also, while the vaccines and boosters are free, it's not going to last forever. Thank you. Good night, everyone. And thank you, LJ.
Don't forget to vote.
And don't forget to vote.
November
Register
8th,
and then vote.
2022.
Register to vote and then vote for LJ Holloway.
For a better
Good night,
day.
everybody.